I moved countries, I moved continents, I moved languages, I moved apartments, and I also moved alone.
That's
So
huge.
so it's absolutely huge. And then I
Yeah.
started my job almost immediately once I got here. So it's definitely been an adjustment.
It's the Germany Experience, the podcast about life in Germany as seen through the eyes of outsiders. I'm your host, Shaun. Visit the website, thegermanyexperience.de, or send me an email at info@thegermanyexperience.de. This week, my guest is a South African. I've been doing this podcast for almost 3 years. And I've never had a South African on. And as everyone who listens to the podcast regularly knows, or you can hear by my accent probably, I'm a South African. So I'm not even sure how it is possible that I've gone for 3 years without having a South African on. My first ever South African guest is Rachel.
Hi.
Sorry, you know why I stopped there? Because I suddenly realized that on Instagram, your name is Rach. And then suddenly I had this weird feeling like, what if it's not Rachel? What if it's something else? So it's Rachel, right?
It's Rachel. It's Rachel. I mean, Rach is a nickname, but it's Rachel.
That's what I thought. I don't know why I got so insecure about it at that moment. So my first South African guest is Rachel. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, and I am not as happy as me because the story about this is Rachel happened to ask me a question on Instagram over the weekend. And we're going to get to that question a little later in our discussion. But what happened on my side is I had a guest planned for this week, and they had to cancel due to illness. So I was left without a recording. I was trying to think of what am I going to do? Am I going to do a Q&A episode, or shall I do something like that? And then in the end, Rachel sent me her question, and I thought, I wonder if I can get her on the podcast. And I didn't want to ask you because I didn't want to put any pressure on you or anything. But then I thought, you know what? Let me just ask. And you were willing to do it at a drop of a hat, basically.
I mean, like I said to you, I would have loved to be a part of the Germany Experience podcast. I mean, I'm a huge listener, and I had a bit of a fangirl moment when we initially met on the video. And so I'm very, very happy to be here today and chat. I mean, I thought I might not have enough Germany experiences to be on the podcast, but you said it's valuable to have a newbie's experience.
I love fresh, very, very fresh perspectives, and we'll talk about how fresh your perspective is. So yeah, I'm thrilled that you're wanting to do it, and we will definitely get you back later on. I can tell you that right now to find out, like, once you've been here for a while, then you can tell me your Germany experiences. But for now, we're going to talk about your initial experiences. We're also going to discuss a bit about your story, about how you got here, why Germany, and so on. And then we're going to get into the question that you asked me. And the question that you were wondering is, or you were looking for some advice. You've got this job, you can do remote working, and you were wondering, is it best to settle down in the city or perhaps find something out in the country? So we're going to get to that. So you are from Cape Town. You lived in Sea Point. Is that where you were born and raised?
No, not actually. So I was born in Durban but raised in Johannesburg, and that's sort of where the story of how I got to Germany begins. The reason for that is because I actually went to the German school in Johannesburg, TSJ. And I went there for a few years, and then that's where I started learning German and went on like exchange to Germany and thought about studying German and all kinds of things. And that just sort of started the journey. And then I moved to Cape Town to study, and here I am.
Here you are. So why the German school though? What resulted in that decision?
I think so. My parents wanted me to. I mean, I'm not German, and I have no German ancestry. But my parents wanted me to learn foreign languages, and they looked at like the usual private schools like Rodin and things like that, and they just thought the German school offered really quite a holistic experience of learning like German, and you could also learn French. And I mean, I think it was the best decision for me because German has always paid off, so to speak. And I loved the German school. It was very academic, but also just a very cool school.
Okay, so you learned German at the German school. That means your German is already pretty good, I should imagine.
These days, I mean, I was actually listening to a podcast of yours earlier today where you were saying that, I think it was one of the podcasts where you were talking about that Wunderblah ranked you as B1 when from a vocab perspective, you were like, this is unacceptable.
I'm still not over it.
I'm the other way around. So I think from a grammar perspective, my grammar is quite good, but my vocab these days is just shocking. And I've definitely picked that up from being here. I mean, I don't remember like some of the more basic words, but I don't have as much of an accent as most people do when they initially learn German. I think obviously because Germans taught me.
Yeah. And I think you got the good problem. Like, I think it's much better to have good grammar and then fill in the Wortschatz, because the vocabulary will come pretty quickly. Like living in Germany, you'll pick up words left, right, and center.
I hope so.
You will, but if you can fit it into grammar, that's already pretty sturdy. That is. I think that is a very cool situation to have. I've got the other way. Like my vocabulary is fantastic. My German grammar is not so fantastic.
I can't imagine that it's that bad after 12, 13 years. But
I don't know. Okay, so what caused you to decide? I mean, I guess because of the German school, you already had that in mind, and you said that you did some kind of studies abroad over here in Germany.
Yeah, so I mean, that was more when I was in school, but that wasn't something that, I mean, obviously the German influenced the decision of coming to Germany, but I think it's a little bit more multifaceted in the sense that, I mean, so I'm a lawyer, and basically I studied law and practiced as an attorney in South Africa, and I sort of got to the point where I wanted to leave my job, but the job market in South Africa just wasn't very good for lawyers who wanted to move outside of law firms. Yeah. And I did want to move away from that more corporate life and into, a more exciting, sort of more dynamic and cross-collaborative role. And I just wasn't finding it in SA. Like I tried my best to find opportunities, and I just wasn't finding anything. Right. And then what sort of forced the issue was, the sort of sense of it, like it was a year down the line and I still hadn't found anything. And I was just like, okay, I'm just going to start looking overseas. And I looked in the UK a little bit, but like, through LinkedIn. But I mean, Germany sort of almost immediately, it was like a natural choice. Because I didn't really want to live in London. We'll get to the city versus countryside thing, but London life is not for me. And so I thought Germany, and it just happened very quickly, actually.
But now, so there's a lot of this opens up a lot of questions in my mind, because I would have thought for law, you've studied law in English, but now you're dealing with German law. How does that work? Like if you got to operate in German law now, is that a big step for you?
Yeah, it sounds a lot more complex than it actually plays out in real life. I mean, I think if you have to go from like a law firm to law firm, it gets maybe a little bit more complicated. But it's the same thing with the UK, where you go and you practice as a foreign qualified lawyer. And generally, I mean, in the bigger areas like corporate law, the understanding of like how like acquisitions work, or buying shares in a company, is the same. I mean, you might have specific provisions that like Germany's companies or their relevant company act has that South Africa's doesn't, but the principles are the same. And so almost having a diverse background can actually be like an asset, I think. And I mean, obviously with certain things it becomes a little bit more complicated. I think with like environmental law, which can be completely completely different in two different jurisdictions, that's more complicated to move across.
Right. So when you got in touch with me originally, or like, I can't remember what the context was, but you asked a question about joining a corporate company or a startup, which would be a better option for you. Okay, just remind me of the context again, and I'm curious as to which option you ended up going with.
Okay, so the context is when I started looking for jobs, I basically found two jobs, and one was going to be based in Berlin and one was going to be based in Munich. And I won't say which one yet, but basically one was at a big corporate law firm, very similar in nature to the one that I left in South Africa, though slightly smaller teams. And then the other one was a startup with significant funding, so it wasn't as if I was leaving to go to a startup of two people. I didn't have that risk involved, but it had the risk of being a completely different kind of culture and environment, and one I wasn't used to. and one the corporate one was going to be more German based, and then this one was going to be more English based because
Right.
the startup has quite diverse cultures and across different nationalities.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the decision was just tough because it's difficult to leave what you know. I mean, I although I was coming from a corporate and I was looking to leave a corporate because I didn't want to be a part of the corporate environment, it was like, well, what's the best decision from the perspective of people who've actually lived here? What do they think? And so that's where I was coming from, asking the question. And also maybe because within the legal fraternity, at least, it's sometimes looked down upon people who leave like law firms for in-house positions. And so there was like that context. So yeah, so it was a tough decision, but I actually went with the startup in Berlin, and I mean, it's early days, but I'm very, very happy with my decision.
That is interesting. It is a common thing that foreigners face when they're coming to Germany, is like the corporate. And I think what I said back then was that the corporate is, it depends what you like. Like there's a lot more traditional stuff in big corporations, and of course there's a generalization. But a startup is more flexible, and exactly like you said, a little more international. Generally, they have a little more. They hire people from all over the place. They're more open, or were more open with things like home office, remote work, this kind of thing. Although big corporates are now also on board with that. So yeah, it's interesting to hear that you chose the startup and like how that's working out for you. And I can imagine that's a big jump because, like you said, corporate, what that kind of company is like. You're moving to a whole new country, a whole new culture. And I would guess my instinct might have been to stick with what I know on the career front.
Oh my God, you are so on the money.
Yeah.
It's been a huge adjustment. I'm not, and I definitely can't say that I'm adjusted yet. I moved countries, I moved continents, I moved languages, I moved apartments, and I also moved alone. So
that's huge.
So it's absolutely huge. And then I started my job almost immediately once I got here. So it's definitely been an adjustment. I can't say that I'm adjusted, but I'm, and there were moments where I felt really overwhelmed. I was like, "What am I doing here?
Yeah.
What am I doing here?
Why might I do this?"
And well, also it doesn't help that Cape Town is experiencing some of the best weather it's experienced probably in years. I don't know. Summer has been going on for like 4 months now, and the weather is glorious.
Oh my God!
And I'm seeing these pictures of like Stellenbosch, like bathed in sunlight, the mountains, Franschhoek, and I'm just like,
and just to be clear, the Western Cape, when the Western Cape has beautiful weather, I don't think there is any part of the world that is more beautiful than Western Cape when it's having perfect weather. That is hard. That is hard to see.
It is hard to see. Thank you. Yeah. Another person who can acknowledge it, because I'm sitting here in Berlin where the sun. I mean, and I know this isn't as bad as people have had it in the past. The sun is now setting at 5:30, not at 4:30. So we must be grateful. But definitely, and I wouldn't even mind the cold or the rain that much because I've had the summer, but seeing the pictures of it just hurts a little bit.
Yeah. What's interesting is when my wife and I were planning to come over to Germany back in 2007, she got the job, and then we were supposed to move in, I think it was mid-January, early January. And her manager at the time, my wife's manager, because we came over with my wife's job, and her manager at the time, who been to Germany, told her, "You must not move in winter. Like, just wait a few months, talk to them and say April." And we didn't fully understand it. We took that advice and we moved in April.
Yes.
But we didn't fully understand. And then that first winter afterwards, we were like, oh,
this is why.
Good advice.
Other people said the other way around. And I found this, I saw it on a Facebook post and I found it so interesting. They were like, come in about sort of Jan or Feb, because then just as you're getting super, super homesick, the weather gets really good. And then you see it's a different way of thinking about it. Yeah. And so I was like, I wasn't going to come in the depths of winter. I mean, that wasn't going to be a thing. But I think February's okay. It's not unbearably cold. You definitely need to, if you're coming from like a country like South Africa or a South American country, you definitely need to go to the German shops and buy some winter clothing, which I had to do very quickly.
But, did you have a jacket? Did you have a winter jacket? Me neither when I came. Me neither.
No, but also, Shaun, you cannot rely on South African shops for those kinds of winter jackets.
No.
I mean, I was shocked at what is included in a jacket here. I mean, you have this like little like fleece like under thing by the hand holding part, and then you have fleece in the pockets, and you have like various different zips on the side and buttons so that when you're riding your bike you can just zip it up. It's like, I don't know, it's like an appliance in Germany. Yeah. It's not a jacket.
It is so true. Like, I think a lot of the people who come from the northern hemisphere won't understand what you're saying, but I 100% get what you're saying. We came with our little, what we thought, I had like a tracksuit top. I had a tracksuit top when we came in March, and my wife and I went out for one day and we're like, we're going to need jackets. We're going to need jackets, even though it's supposedly spring.
And you know, the thing is, I hated South African winters. I was always so cold, and I could never get comfortable. And this has been it's way colder, and I've been completely fine. And it's because they're just, I don't know, the stuff here is just built differently. I get hot in my jacket. I mean, when I'm riding my bike, I've had moments like where I'm riding back and I'm like riding. It's supposed to take me 20 minutes according to the Google Maps app, which I swear is lying. It's like taking me half an hour, and I'm like, I'm hot, and I'm taking things off, and I'm like, and you just see the Germans just flying past me on their bikes, and I'm like, I need to get all of the clothing.
I'm so hot.
Yes. So the clothing is built differently here. Don't buy anything in South Africa for winter.
Okay.
Or any other, or if you're coming from Australia, it doesn't, anything below the equator, just wait.
Don't buy stuff. Buy over here. I think that is very good advice for Southern Hemisphere people, because it's a different buying experience when you come here. So we mentioned it before. You're very, very, very new in Berlin. You landed in at the beginning of February. We're now like maybe 2-3 weeks later, if that, maybe 2 weeks. I think you've been here for 2 weeks.
Yeah, not long.
How's that going for you? Like, how is it in general?
I think, it's better than I expected. So I am a steadfast listener of the Germany experience, and I have heard from many, many different people, you've just got to brace yourself for it. A lot of people say it's tough, it's horrible, they're crying a lot, and then it's just sort of working through those emotions, and then you'll be okay. Even you said, I know you with your commute, your initial commute I don't know how you did that. I've told people about
I don't know how to do that.
They don't believe me that you commuted 3 hours a day.
Yeah.
And anyway, I everyone sort of prepared me listening to your podcast, and a few other podcasts helped. The Expat Cast.
How dare you? How dare you?
I know. Sorry. Yours is my favorite. How can I not have the South African as my favorite?
That's all I wanted.
So I was ready for it, to be tough, and it has been tough. I think there are moments where I've been, quite overwhelmed. I had like my first few days of work, and then I remember coming home and I was like exhausted, and I just wanted to watch TV, and then my internet wasn't working, and I was like, it was like there are a few things that happened that day, and I was just like, ooh, this is the point. This is where it bubbles over. and I had like a little bit of a cry, and then feel better, and then you're 100%. But it's been good so far. I think the biggest thing, and this is something that all the people on the Germany experience have said, is making friends is going to I foresee is going to be probably the hardest, but maybe the most rewarding thing.
Yeah, it is. But I think also Berlin is also a good place to make friends that maybe not German friends at first, but there's a lot of other opportunities for making friends. And also the Germans in those big cities are generally more open as well, more friendly, more spontaneous, I could say, than other Germans.
On that note, I actually do want to mention this, because I got this from, I think, a YouTube video and a podcast, and maybe another YouTube video. Apparently Bumble for Friends is a big thing in Berlin. And I actually joined it a few days ago, and it seems rather promising. I haven't met anyone weird yet. Haven't gotten any really dodgy messages.
You sound disappointed.
Somewhat. You'd expect to find odd people looking, for you to sell your kidney.
Sure. Yeah.
But it actually hasn't. It hasn't happened. And you'd be surprised. I would have thought everyone on there would have been, expats. But there's actually a lot of Germans who are like, my friends have left the city, or I work in an industry that doesn't have a lot of females in it, so I'd like to make some friends.
Right.
And so, I think it is just a thing of, trying to be dedicated to it, in the sense that you actually message these people and try and make a connection. But in this day and age, I think it's one of the more necessary ways of making friends. Going up to someone in a supermarket is no longer cool.
No, no. Speaking of supermarkets, I loved one of the very first posts. So you've got your Instagram account. You've got a private Instagram account, I guess, and then there's one that you've started called Rach in Berlin. I think it was called, if I remember correctly.
Yes, that is exactly it.
And one of the early things that you posted was in the middle of another post, and you just said, why are cashiers in supermarkets so fast? And I think that is something that most people are met with when they arrive.
You know, I have advice for this, and I didn't hear this on any of the the previous podcasts that I listened to. But it's to actually just take your trolley. Don't pack it when they're just scanning it. Don't pack your packets. Just put it back into your trolley or back into your basket, and then they usually have these like cupboard things on the side, and you can just pack at your own pace there. Because I tried on the first day, I knew that they were really fast, and so I tried to prepare myself, and I was like, I'm going to be super fast too. They're not going to get me, and so I like tried to pack, and I just couldn't keep up with the speed. I was ready for speed, but I wasn't ready for this speed. And then I got so flustered. That's how I lost my little supermarket key as well. Which you'll need to explain to your listeners, because that's only a thing in Germany.
It is. That is something that's very strange. You're talking about the little token that you put in the trolley. And I just want to say this by now before you continue. I'm loving this discussion because I think I said at the beginning of the thing, I am loving hearing a South African accent. I'm just loving this. And when you say trolley for shopping cart, honestly makes my heart happy. So I'm loving it. I just wanted to say that I'm loving listening to the South African accent and language.
Wait, if I can just interrupt you. Something else I keep saying is robot, and then no one understands what I'm saying.
So just to be clear, just for everyone to know, in South Africa, we call traffic lights robots. And I don't know how this happened. Like, how did it? I can imagine that we were in South Africa. They put in the first traffic lights, and we were like, "Oh, look at the robots! It's automatic. It must be a robot."
Yeah.
So we call traffic lights robots, and I've gotten that out of my vocabulary because the Germans have no idea what you're saying when you say go to the robot.
No one has any idea, not just the Germans, and no one else.
True. That's true. It's like South Africa is the only country. It's not even a thing that we got from the British people. We just made it up ourselves.
I love that. We've got some things. Braais and trolleys and robots.
Braais, exactly. Braais and trolleys and robots. So you were saying that there's a little token that you put in the trolley, or the shopping cart as the Americans like to call it, and then you can take it out of the sort of the thing.
Yeah, so my landlord actually, like on my key, she gave me this little one that, like, I don't know, it was like a little coin-like thing that stuck into a little holder, so that every single time you go to the shopping cart, and you'll always have your keys for your house, you'll just put it in, you'll go take your shopping cart, and then you'll put it back and take it out. Right. The first day I get here, the first night in my apartment, I go to the supermarket, I get overwhelmed, and I forget the trolley, and there goes the shopping cart. And I remembered when I got home, because I took my key out and I saw it wasn't there, and I was like, it's too far to walk. It's like 15 minutes walk. I'm not doing it. I was like, it's lost forever.
we get a new token or something. That's fine. It is a very strange thing to adjust to, that whole shopping thing. But like you said, with the shopping carts and everything in South Africa, we're used to. Gosh, how does it work in South Africa again? You just pick them up somewhere, right?
How do you not know this, Shaun? I'm shocked.
I've been way too long.
You can. I think it's even in other countries. I think Germany is like the only country that does this. You can just take a shopping, I don't call it a shopping cart, a trolley. You can just take it. You can leave it wherever you want. It does not matter. You know, you see people rolling game trolleys. Game is like a homeware store. You see people rolling game trolleys just down the road, and maybe that's why the Germans did it, because they don't want people taking the trolleys.
Germans are not trusting anybody. They're like, you're going to use tokens.
If anything, the society here is so law-abiding that I can't imagine anyone not putting their trolley back. But
such a good point. Like, the Germans are so rule oriented that I can't imagine a German ever not returning their trolley. But what I can tell you is, now that they've had a law, and if they ever took the law away, Germans would be going like chaotic with their trolleys. They will be taking them home. They will be taking them to the riverside for grill.
It'd be like freedom.
It'd be like, finally we can take our trolleys.
Yeah, I mean, well, I've seen it. You see, so also, paying attention to the little guy who tells you when to go green, when it's, when you can cross the road and when you can't. And I know how hectic. I mean, I even a few years ago, I was actually in Berlin, and I'm not lying to you. The road that I crossed was like a little side road that was closed off to repairs. So there was no way a car was coming. And I crossed the road and I got stopped by the police,
No
who told me,
ways.
do you know, you must wait for the green guy.
Oh my God.
This was right by the Brandenburger Tor, and I remember being like, but I mean, no one can get through this road. Yeah, but it wasn't green, and to this day, I now stand at the green guy. If it's raining, if it's pouring, if the road is blocked, I wait for the green guy to go. There are Germans who go across, and I don't go across.
Yeah, Germans do jaywalk, but something we've discussed in this podcast as well is if there is a kid standing there, the Germans will not cross. They were setting a good example. Okay. They'll do it in private, but they'll set a good example for when kids are around. So be sure if there's children around, don't cross at a red traffic light. So maybe we could get to the question that you asked now. I just wanted to mention, you just took a sip of water, but earlier on in our discussion, I almost couldn't get this podcast started because she's just lifted it up. It's the hugest teacup that I've ever seen in my life.
I know, it's big.
Yeah, it's the size of a human head.
I mean, the thing is, I didn't even realize the size relative to my head until I came on this podcast, or actually, earlier today when I was on a call, and I lifted it up, and I actually lifted it up, saw it in the video, switched the video off, and was like, now I can take a cup of, a sip of tea, because it's so big. And I thought I came onto the podcast, and I thought, I'm just going to take a quick sip. He's not going to see anything. And all I hear is, What is that?
I said, what are you drinking?
Yeah, what are you drinking?
Because I had my head turned away from the screen. I was looking down at my mixing desk or something, and just in the corner of my eye, I caught this massive eclipse happening on the screen. And I was like, holy crap, that thing has its own weather systems and gravitational pull.
You would be shocked, and I did say this to you before. I mean, I honestly struggle to lift it with one hand. Like, if it's filled with tea, I have to hold it underneath because otherwise I can't hold it. I can't lift it. Like, it would hurt my wrist if I tried to. And I've got to hold it extra carefully. Like, you can't just hold it the way you would a cup, very loosely, a loose wrist. But I have a hard wrist to make sure.
Firm elbow.
Grip. Yes. Exactly.
So tell me the story about this teacup. How is it that you ended up with the world's largest teacup in your house? Okay, so back in Cape Town, I mean, I had a big teacup, not as big as this. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a teacup like this, but I had a big teacup, and I mean, I had 4 of them at home, and I really loved them. Didn't think twice about bringing them, and then just didn't bring them. And then I got here and I was looking on Amazon because I had no idea where to go. I was like, maybe I can go to IKEA, but I was like, I have no idea where IKEA is. And then people told me IKEA doesn't have good cups. And so I was like, okay, this is not good. I have no idea of any other homeware stores. So I was Googling, and I, of course, ordered from Jeff's personal website, Amazon.com. Yeah.
And I mean, also, I might mention this to your listeners. If you go on smile.amazon.de, then you can at least donate some of the money that you spend to charity, which I didn't know, but now I do, and now I'm doing that. Anyway, long story short, got this cup, and I remember thinking at the time of ordering it, this is a rather expensive cup, but I was like, I don't know where else to buy cups. And then it arrived, and I was like, oh, this is why it's expensive, because it's, I don't know, triple the size of a normal cup.
But you love it, right? I can see that you love this cup now.
I do love the cup now. I mean, I have these really large cups of tea, and you would think I would finish them. It would take me so long to finish them, but I just gulp it down as if it's water, and then it's gone in a minute. So.
Oh gosh, the teacup. It's become a guest in its own right on this podcast.
I'm so glad.
Okay, so let's get to your question. This is what you wrote. It's always been a plan of mine to live in the countryside, and my current company is very flexible about remote working. That's one of the cool things, right, about finding jobs at the moment, is that companies are more open to remote working. So that helps. That must have helped with your situation.
Oh my gosh, that was a leading factor in why I chose the startup over the corporate as well. I mean, there were various other factors, but it was a big one because the corporate, they were keen to get back into the office, and I honestly felt like I could never go back to the way I worked before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the same. I don't think I could ever be full-time in the office again.
Yeah.
So you said, so I'm beginning to have the thought process on whether to stay in Berlin for 2 years and then move somewhere more natureful, or the countryside, or to look at it as a goal by the end of the year. So you like in the more in the short term, do you want to try and get to the country?
Yes. Yes.
Essentially, I'm open to any district of Germany, and my company is too. A lot of people have moved to a fully remote option and live in different areas of Germany. And I guess I'd like more of the country life. I love green open spaces, forests, and want to live close to nature. Do you have any recommendations of areas? Yeah, so let's just talk about that for a second. Did you live? You didn't live rurally in South Africa. You said Johannesburg, so that's pretty like city.
Yeah, I mean, and I wanted to actually say this, but I mean, I would have left South Africa, I think, long before if I lived in Johannesburg still, just because Johannesburg is just not as nice to live in. It's not as
easy to
safe as
leave.
Cape Town. It's easy to leave. It's easy to leave Joburg.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people who move outside actually realize just what they're missing out on. And yeah, I mean the lifestyle. So the lifestyle in Cape Town, I mean, is a lot more full of nature and full of opportunities to go outside of Cape Town and go and sort of live in a more remote way. But with my job, it wasn't really ever an option, and we were settled in Sea Point, and so it didn't really look like it was going to happen. But I mean, Berlin has really offered me the chance to consider that more fully because. Yeah. Even districts that are like an hour away, or little towns that are like an hour away from Berlin, are still really accessible, whilst also being offering a way more sort of remote way of living and more village type of living.
Yeah, and it's something in South Africa when you decide to live rurally, like. When we say rural in South Africa, we mean rural. I mean, there's some places where it's just a little farmhouse and then is a little or a little dorpy or a little farmhouse and there's nothing. There's nothing for 200 kilometers. Like that's not the case in Germany. Yeah. When you say you want to live in a village here, it's like literally 10 minutes away from something.
No, exactly. Well, the thing is as well, I mean, I was never going to live like in South Africa in the middle of nowhere. I mean, I could maybe have done it somewhere in the Western Cape, and I swear I love Plet. So I mean, Plet is it's still a town, but I mean, Plet is beautiful, and I mean, I could have lived a simpler life in Plettenberg Bay. For those who don't know, if you want to visit South Africa, I highly recommend.
Oh, it's amazing there.
It's beautiful, but yeah, it just wasn't an option. And the difference is we don't have the kind of public transport system that Germany and the rest of Europe does. In South Africa, it's necessary to have a car, and and then in Pletcher or even more remote places, you're really remote, and you can't really get to anything, and so it's not as much of an option as I think it is here.
Absolutely, and it's a good chance. There's also the security aspect when you're living very rurally in South Africa. There's also there's always, and in fact, most of the places that you live in South Africa, there's a security and crime aspect, even though some areas are better than others. Yeah. So I think for especially for people from a country like South Africa, it's a great opportunity to finally live out in nature, which is not necessarily an option that many people might have or want to do back in South Africa.
Well, exactly, especially as a woman. I mean, it's not something I would have ever considered doing, on my own in South Africa. It just it's the sad reality, but it is a reality. And I mean, here it really is an option, and I've always wanted to do it. And the question has become, particularly with Berlin, I don't know if you know, and I think it's many German cities are experiencing a huge housing shortage, and finding apartments is honestly a full-time job here. And while I have like a short-term apartment for the next few months, I don't have anything long-term, and I've given a lot of thought, or I'm beginning to give thought to whether to look more on the outskirts, and live that life that I've always dreamed of living.
Yeah. So my personal take on this, when my wife and I moved to Germany, we landed up in cities or in Würzburg, which is in Lower Franconia, and there it's like 100 and something thousand people. So it's also not a massive city, but it's a larger city. And one of the things that we loved there is just having everything that you need. We didn't need a car. I didn't need a car for the first, I think, 7 years in Germany. There was just no need for it. We had the Straßenbahn, so the trams. We had buses. We had trains to get most places that we wanted to get. And everything was just within our reach. Like if we wanted to go to a hardware store, we had a hardware store. We had everything. And if we wanted to pop down for an ice cream or a burger on a Saturday night, we could just do it. And that is something that we really, really enjoyed about living in the city in Germany. Also, something that's different from a city life in South Africa. Generally, people don't live in, well, people do live in the central parts of town, but they're generally for businesses and offices and so on.
Yes.
And people in South Africa tend to congregate in the suburbs, and then you've got these highly densely populated suburbs. And one of the things that I loved was actually living in a city, in the middle of a city, and just enjoying that feeling of like nightclubs everywhere and people all times of day. It depends what you're looking for. So that's a nice experience, and it was great for us. But then, of course, we made the move to where I am now, and we're quite rural in Germany terms. Like we're 45 minutes away from the nearest cities. There's no Bahnhof here. There's no train station here. So, like, strictly speaking,
rural. That's
we're rural. There are cows around here. There are animals.
I love that. I want to live by cows.
You wake up, and the Germans have this thing called Landluft, which is country air. Yes. So, like in spring and autumn, or wherever they're putting manure on their fields, we get that. Like we're enjoying that. And the first few years, it was it was difficult. But now I actually am growing to love like that country air. It sounds very strange, but it's just part of the experience here. I think the big thing about living so rurally, like we are, is the German is an aspect. You need to have good German to live out in the countryside. And also what's great is if you look nearby to cities, like you were saying earlier, when you're about 20 minutes to an hour away from a city, even by train or whatever, and you've got a train station in the village, you can still be in the city when you need to be. When you want to go to the cinema, or if you want to go to some nice restaurants, it's easy to do, and it's easy to get back home. So it's a great trade-off. Like you can still live pretty rurally and be close to civilization.
And well, a big factor for me was that I'm finding, even with remote working, I still spend a lot of, I'm anyway by my desk most of the day. And then I'm not, because of working late and things like that, I don't generally, even in South Africa, I didn't generally necessarily see my friends during the week a lot because you're tired after work. There's other things you want to do. Maybe you want to exercise a little bit or things like that. And so anyway, the weekend is when I would maybe see them. And coming in on the weekend on train is not the end of the world by any measure.
Yeah. I think the biggest difference is it's easier to make friends in the cities. I would say that's one of the biggest things. And but I think you can't go wrong like with whatever you choose to do.
That's good. That's good to know. I mean, I think it's such a tough decision, and it's obviously no decision is forever, but it is something that I lived in Sea Point, so for those of your listeners who don't know, it is fairly central in the sense that there are tons of restaurants around it. There's lots of small businesses and things, and you are sort of very city based, but you're close to the sea. It's a nice little mix. And I think the thing that's pushed me towards it is that I've always wanted to live where I'm living, and I like wake up to see grass, and the idea of seeing cows and horses on like a walk sounds absolutely amazing to me.
Yeah.
And I think also, one of the things is that I'm one of those people who's always been a little bit too old for her actual age. Like I'm like one of those old souls, those grannies who like love to read. Like everyone else is like out partying, and I'll be like, oh my gosh, can I have a big cup of tea,
large cup of tea,
and my book, or these days a Kindle, and so I've always just been a little bit like more of an old soul. And I think also a big thing that I've found, in the legal field, and I'm not sure you've actually had another lawyer on before, but
I don't think I have.
I don't think you have either. I was quite shocked that I was the first South African, but I'm also really, really, really proud that I am. Like, I'm so stoked.
Getting all the niches though, the first lawyer and the first South African.
The South African part is particularly special, I think, because there are a lot of South Africans in Germany. So being a lawyer, it can be quite a stressful job, I think. Obviously many jobs are very stressful, but lawyers do have like a high rate of suicide. They do have a high rate of misery, really, and a high rate of like heart attacks and things like that. Wow. And I think COVID brought like so much perspective to my life and like what I wanted for my future. And I think a big thing was realizing I didn't want to chase this big corporate life and work like horrific hours just for money. And I did want a simpler life and to live a little bit more closely to like my soul, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
And
it
in
does.
that sense, I think, I think all humans are maybe in some ways, in love with nature, but maybe to varying degrees. And I've just always felt this like pull whenever I go. I'm one of those people. Whenever I go 2 days away in the countryside, I always never want to leave, and I just want to live that simpler life. And
Yeah.
I feel like, all of these difficulties of living in the countryside, I'd like to experience for myself, to say, oh my gosh, the countryside is not for me. Or
Yes.
actually, I was always a country person in my heart, and the city
Yeah.
life wasn't for me.
Yeah.
So it is one of those tough decisions, but I'll have to give
Well, I
both
don't think it is.
options.
I don't think it is, Rachel. With everything you've just told me now, I don't think it is. I think you've got your answer. You don't even need me. I think it sounds like we've solved your problem.
I'm scared to do it, Shaun.
So I wanted to, just before we move on from that subject, one of the things just about this living thing is you asked a further question. You said just some ideas about how to go about the process of finding places to live.
Yes.
Are there any things that you should keep in mind? There's tons. There are tons of things to keep in mind,
Okay,
and I think
okay.
that's a podcast episode on its own. I would say that the best thing you can do is just especially in your situation, I think is a great situation to be in, where you've got some place and you've got a few months to do, is just start checking out things and going to see places. Like, you don't even have to be committed to renting. Just going to see like what kind of places are out there, what kind of areas are interesting. And that's fun in itself as well. I think that's part of the fun for me, is that looking around and kind of sizing up apartments and seeing what you like, what you don't like, when there's no pressure, where you walk into and you're like, oh my God, I need a place for next month. I have to take the first thing that I get. So I think that would be my biggest advice, is just to enjoy the process and do it slowly. And now, while there's no pressure, there are people who can help. I had a guest on my show a while ago. She's based in Munich. Her name was Magdalena. And she helps people find apartments in Munich. And I would assume there's a lot of people that do similar services in Berlin, but they tend to be, they cost a bit of money. You have to, obviously give them I don't know how they work it, whether it's a percentage of the rent or deposit or something, but that is also an option.
No, but you know what? I would definitely consider paying for someone to find me what I was looking for, because I think I have something in mind, and just being able, like, and having not even necessarily a local, but just having someone who knows the areas more than I do, I think would come in a lot of handy. So I'll definitely have a look.
Yeah. Yes. So I think that's the best way to do it. Either take your time, or get someone to help you with the process.
Maybe I'll definitely message you about what I decide and whether I
would love to know. I would love to know. So I'm going to tell you two things. The first thing is, yes, you are definitely coming back. You've earned yourself another invitation on this podcast, and not because not just because you're South African, not because of your gigantic teacup, but because this was a fun chat. And the other thing that I wanted to say is that it's you don't know how much it's lifted my spirits to talk to another South African. It sounds like a strange thing to say, but whenever I hear like South Africans speaking, or when I talk to South Africans, it just lifts my spirit like immensely. Like, it's a little piece of home. So I really appreciated having this chance to talk to you.
One thing that I think is also a really cool way. I mean, I don't know if you listen to the radio at all, but when I was in Plet, I was actually in Plet right before I came here, which was actually so special because it was a nice way to sort of say goodbye to it. And and I was listening to this radio station called Algoa FM.
I know Algoa.
Oh, okay, you know Algoa. Okay.
I grew up in East London. I don't know if you know East London.
Yes, of course. I mean, okay, I am South African. Give me some credit here, please.
Of course, sorry, I'm so used to Germans that don't know, because you always have to explain. It's Port Elizabeth, and then about 3 hours from Port Elizabeth, then there's East London. And we Algoa was our regional radio station.
Okay.
So Algoa FM.
Algoa is going strong. And the thing is, if anything, I think it's actually the best radio station in SA. Like,
it was always
the
great.
music that they play, like, it's so much better than what like 5FM and 94.5 KFM and 94.7 play. It's so much better. And when I'm feeling like a little bit homesick, I like listen to them. I have this radio app. I don't even know what it's called, but I mean, I'm sure they're all the Radio Garden, and it's like planting your. It's actually so cute when it's loading. It says planting your seeds or something like that, and then I listen to it, and like it really lifts my spirits. To hear like just a South African voice, or also just to hear someone talking about a cultural reference that I understand. Because even though like I've done a lot of research to understand like cultural differences here, so that I'm not shocked. I think it's still nice to hear your home, language and people saying things the way you say them.
Definitely, and it's a nice connection to home. When you at a time when you need a connection to home, like just moving here, fresh in Germany, I think it's also you need that connection somehow. So I think that's a good advice to use those radio apps. So this has been so much fun talking to you, and I'm so, like one thing I will say before we close this off is that usually before I talk to a guest on this podcast, we have at least one prep call where nothing is recorded, where we talk about what are potential topics.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
I get to prepare something. Yeah, that usually is what happens. I think one or two guesses is not the case. In your case, I literally asked you this morning. This evening, we're recording an episode. It has been so much fun, and I really appreciate it. So I'm so happy that you could do this. And like I said, you need to come back on the podcast. What is your Instagram? Tell me, where can people find you? Where do you want people to find you?
Well, I think Rach in Berlin is where I want people to find me.
Okay.
And that's my Instagram.
And I will link in the show notes as I always do. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Thank you so much, Shaun. Bye.